The Orange Blossom Classic has a new date, time, and channel. To me, this is all an example of ESPN valuing the product a whole lot less. Oh, yeah, it's locked on HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darrion Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire and site expert at Who Dat Dish. Thank you for going on this journey with me, making Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. It just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusive. Start with an S. It ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. For my everydayers, you can now go to FanDuel, and if you are a new customer, get $200 back in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. We'll wrap up today's episode by taking a look at Willie Totten and how experience is probably the greatest asset that he'll be bringing now that he's joined the Fort Valley State coaching staff. In segment 2, Tuskegee has their first ever night game coming up in 2025. And the fact they can do this is great for their move to the Division I level, potential move. But let's start this whole thing off because I'm not so certain that the Orange Blossom Classic changing their date, time, and channel is a good thing. I'm actually pretty confident that it is a bad sign for how the product is being viewed. I don't think that it's going to leave ESPN, but it has definitely, from what I'm seeing, been bumped down the priority ladder. And of course, you don't want to come out sounding ungrateful. So we're going to use a quote from Kendra Bullock Major, who is the executive director of the OBC. And she's talking about this event changing and how they're still in good position. I just think they're in worse position than they were. They're in solid. Guys, I try to come on and be positive. I don't like this at all. I was going to try to find the silver lining as she has, but I don't have it. We'll react to what she says in a little bit. But to me, in all, this is a sign of the game being looked at as less of a priority by ESPN. And they aren't obligated to have this be a priority, right? I don't want to seem entitled. I don't want to come off that way. But where the Orange Blossom Classic was positioned was perfect. And I don't know why they changed. I don't think that the Orange Blossom Classic would ask for this change. I would have to say that the networks would push for it because I don't know, unless there was just a scheduling conflict with the stadium or something. If this is the change moving forward, this is not good for the OBC. That's my opinion on that, right? And the reason I talk about the networks is the networks moved the Celebration Bowl. And we had Dr. McClellan talking about that. I think we talked about his quote maybe a week, 2 weeks ago. And he talked about how the networks are the ones that push the Celebration Bowl up a week. And that's the same network. So we know that they have this power, but since the Classic's return, it's been on a Sunday. Now it's on a Saturday. And I know that one day may feel like, okay, well, it's still that first weekend. It's probably still, no, it is on a Sunday. It was on a Sunday when there was no NFL action, very little college football action. They had a cleared out schedule for them essentially, right? Like this is the first week of college football that the OBC is going to play, week 1. In week 0, we know what the SWAC MEAC Challenge gets from being pretty much unopposed. You don't have a lot of games that are competing with it. So you have less markets that may get viewers. You have less games that may be being watched. So you have more viewers, the ceiling is higher. I'm not saying that, let's say you have 100 people and there's 5 games, everybody's going to watch 20. That's not how it works. But if there's 3 games opposed to 7 games, then you have a better chance of people checking out your matchup, right? And that's how I look at the move from Sunday to Saturday. You're in the thick of action now. When you were on Sunday, you essentially had a week 0 type of clear out. You have very small amount of games that played on Sunday. This year, it's only 2. I don't know what it was the year before, but this year, it's only 2 games that are playing on Sunday on the FBS level, at least. That was really going to be your only competition. But now you moved over to Saturday. Now you moved over to Saturday. You're at 2 o'clock Central. Excuse me, you're at 3 o'clock Central. Last year you were at 2. I don't think that the time change really makes that much of a difference, to be honest. I don't think that it makes that much of a difference. Though I probably would want to be at 2 o'clock this year. Nah, it's the closeness of that 2 to 3 is because you're right there staggered with the 2:30 games. So now the question becomes, do you want to be on before the 2:30 games or do you want to be on after the 2:30 games, right? Because if you start at 2 o'clock, you'll start earlier. They can probably catch most of the first quarter before that game starts, but at the same time, you have to be wary about the 11 o'clock games. But then if you go and you stagger and start at 3 o'clock, you'll start after. Like, you'll get the brunt. Most of your action will be happening at the same time as a 2:30 matchup. The reason I point these things out, because maybe let me not talk like you just know the college football schedule, right? Because somebody may not. In college football, you're gonna have games. The top games are gonna start at 11, or most popular slots. The games are gonna start 11, 2:30, and then probably like that 6-7 o'clock night game range, right? This is just the regular programming for college football. So you're going to bump into one of those. You're not starting on the time. So you're going to bump into one of those slots. I don't think it really matters. I don't think neither one is important. But when you hear Kendra Bullock Major say it's on an hour later than our usual time start, we're still on linear TV. We got an hour later kickoff. We're happy with it. The viewership is still good. I think we are the main thing, or that's not. I think the main thing is to have us in a time slot where we're not competing against too many featured matchups. Coming on before LSU and Clemson is great. So you're going to have the LSU Clemson game week 1. And that's going to be the main event or co-main event, depending on how you look at it. You are missing out on Texas versus Ohio State. That probably is the main event. The only reason I call LSU Clemson that is because it's a night game. Actually, Ohio State and Texas tried to move their game to the night, but I think Texas was the one who said, we're not doing that. The point is, you're missing out on Texas versus Ohio State because you're at 11. Cool. So this year, 3 o'clock may actually work. You're at 11 o'clock with that game. LSU, Clemson, I think, is going to come on at 7, right? So those are the 2 premier matchups of week 1. But the one game that you're not going to miss is Alabama versus Florida State. Now, Alabama versus Florida State, to me, is a game that a lot of people are still going to tune in for. I understand that these teams didn't come off of the best years, but it's a game between a ACC opponent and an SEC opponent who have big names in college football. And Alabama is going to be watched closely to see if they're able to bounce back. I think I heard Kalen DeBoer talk about something about his schedule and everything, which we will talk about schedules next week. I think we may do that on Monday. I think money games are going to start going away. Shout out to Kyle T. Mosley for mentioning that. But there's a slight chance that you overlap with LSU Clemson. Very slight, but I don't think that you will. If everything moves well, right? Like, say you don't have any sort of rain delay. If you have rain delays, it's over for you. But my thing is, would you rather compete with Alabama versus Florida State or Virginia Tech versus South Carolina? I'm not a fan of moving this from Sunday to Saturday because you're going to be in the thick of action. So there's so many games that people can pick from. But let's isolate it because on Sunday, you only have one game that you'll be having at, I think it's 2 o'clock. And then on Saturday, you got a bunch of games. But let's isolate the biggest matchup on Saturday versus the only matchup on Sunday at the beginning of your game. Would you rather have to compete in the first, second, third quarter with Bama versus Florida State or Virginia Tech versus South Carolina? I think that says everything. That's easy. It's less competition. It's a less premier game. Yes, you have Notre Dame versus Miami at 6 or whatever. That is going to be a big deal. But if you started at 2, you're not bumping against that game. The move from Sunday to Saturday is not a good thing. It is not. We can still line it up as if it has some positives because it does. But in totality, this is not a good thing for FAMU or the Orange Blossom Classic or Howard. I want to see what the viewership is like because you have more competition and you've also moved from ESPN to ESPNU. You're bumping down, you're changing the schedule from the best slot that you possibly could have been in. Best slot to right in the thick of action. You've now changed the time, or not time, the channel. You've now changed the channel from ESPN2 to ESPNU. So you have less viewership now. The ceiling, this is what's happened. This is what happened. You're taking the Orange Blossom Classic from a 2 p.m. Central kickoff on ESPN2 on a Sunday with very little amount of games to compete with, then putting it on ESPNU in the thick of Saturday week one. In the thick of Saturday week one with a ton of games to compete with. The ceiling is clearly lowered. Clearly. The ceiling for how many people are going to watch the Orange Blossom Classic has lowered. Now we just have to hope in actuality that more people do tune in. But the amount of people that you have to pick from is going down. Competing versus Bama versus Florida State or South Carolina versus Virginia Tech. I'll let you pick. Being on ESPN2 or ESPNU, I'll let you pick. I'm sure you picked the first option on both of those, but that's not, or excuse me, I'm sure you picked the second option on the first one, first option on the second one, but that's not what FAMU and the OBC got. Now, as we push forward, better news, Tuskegee has lights now. So now they get to have a night game. I love this. This is a great move for Tuskegee, the football team, their potential future, and their present. I want to break all of that down as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Game 6. We got game 6. Be on the lookout. It's the Knicks versus the Pacers. One more, we may have a decisive game 7. I cannot wait. Let me see what the Dallas Stars did. Let's see if they were able to extend their series as well. They did not. Good God Almighty. They got smacked up. Anyway, back to the Knicks and Pacers. Karl Anthony Towns, whose first name is Karl Anthony, Jalen Brunson, Tyrese Halliburton, Miles Turner, a couple other guys who I ain't gonna lie, don't know that much, but they've been balling as I've been watching. I can't remember the name. Nimhard, I think maybe his name. Nimsmith. Are those two different guys? Did I just messed it up? But anyway, you can go to FanDuel and figure out exactly who they are. Because I'm telling you right now, they've been buckets. They have been buckets throughout the series, and I'd bet on the over. So if I was going to FanDuel, I put down a $5 bet that's super easy, and then maybe I turn that into a big time bet later because I'm gonna get $200 back once I win that first $5 bet. I'm thinking smarter. My mom always told me think smarter, not harder. I ain't listened to her until I was this age, but I'm gonna do it. So you go ahead and go to fanduel.com and work smarter, not harder, and make yourself a little extra money. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day. For your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On NBA. It's that time, baby. Like I said, game 6. We are just a matter of a day away. So make sure that you guys are tuning in to that. But Tuskegee is going to have their first ever night game, and it's good for the potential move to Division I. So the university has announced that their home opener versus Central State will now be a night game. It's something that they've never been able to do. Tuskegee has never been able to have a night game ever. And that's simply because they ain't have no lights. And if you don't have any lights, you can't play at night. Because last thing we need is for people hoping that the moon is illuminating the field. It don't work like that. It don't work like that. And you can't see the ball, you can't do nothing. So, and trust me, I've played night game. Trust me, my little league experience tells me playing at night is not easy. I was 7 years old out there. No, I'm joking. But no, seriously, they recently got lights. And what's crazy to me is that Cleve Abbott, who the stadium's named after, Like we're talking about former coach. The stadium's named after him. Suggested this a century ago, and they're just not getting them. So that was a crazy little Snapple fact. I got another Snapple. Oh man, I didn't get my Snapple fact yesterday for Champ Long. Anyway, um, I might be wrong for doing this, but I really view this through the lens of a potential D1 step up in subdivision. And I don't think that Tuskegee did this to make themselves more appealing to the FCS committee, because let's be clear, this is specifically football related. So you're looking at basketball is fine, volleyball, all of these things, maybe soccer. Yeah, they play on the football field. But excuse me, you're looking at the move to the FCS. I don't think they're allowing a team that can't play at night to move up. I just don't. And there may be schools who don't have lights. I don't know, maybe one or two. I don't think it's a lot, but there may be a few schools in the country that are on the FCS level that do not have lights. But I don't think that if you're trying to move up, you cannot have lights. There's a big difference. So I want to leave myself room just in case there's a rare school out there that doesn't have the ability to play night games. But I just feel like you have to, because your facilities is something that's going to be questioned. Your facilities are something that are going to be discussed. They're going to be evaluated, and they have to be up to par. The finances to move up in a subdivision is not simply, the decision to move up in a subdivision is not simply do you win. There's also the finances. How much are you investing? How much revenue can you generate? What is your TV like all of these things, the capability to be broadcast, these things all matter with the decision to move up in subdivision. And honestly, for some people, it matters in how you move conferences as well. Certain conferences require you to have a certain baseline of TV production because that is what they do in their conference. We can't have 11 schools and now the 12th school looking like a JV team. We have to have a standard across the board. And I think that getting lights allows you to get closer, if not reach the standard. I don't know everything that they've done, but it allows you to at least be closer to being, okay, we can do that. And I don't know how many games in the SWAC, because that's probably where they'd end up. I don't know how many games in the SWAC would genuinely be night games. Like you have some Thursday night games, some Friday night games, some 6:00 Saturday games that end up going into the night. So you need lights for that, because you don't want to be in the third, fourth quarter and it's dark outside now because it's 8:30, 9:00. You don't want that. But and obviously in the SIAC you can have them too. But I just feel like in general, this is a great move. It was a necessary move if they were going to move up to the FCS. But that's not the only impact of it, right? Like this has long-term and short or immediate impact. I think that this has long and immediate impact for Tuskegee. And I mean, obviously the long-term is the idea of moving to the FCS and the ability to host night games. I don't think if your stadium is unable to host night games that you can move up in subdivision. We got to start somewhere. But on the other side, it allows you to practice later. And this is one of the things that A.D. Ruffin mentioned. He said this is a transformational moment, not only for Tuskegee athletics, but for the entire university and community. Playing under the lights at Abbott Memorial Stadium gives us new opportunities to engage our fan base, provide better game day experience, and show our rich traditions to a national audience. We are proud to take this step forward and make history in 2025. I thought this was part of the quote, but here it goes. The lights were about more than football. They're about health, safety, and well-being of our student athletes, our student body, our fans, our parents, and our alumni. That's the quote I was looking for to address the fact that you get to play and practice later in less heat. In Alabama, that's a great thing. Yeah, maybe in North Dakota, that doesn't really matter. Maybe in Illinois, that doesn't really matter. But in Alabama, in August, September, that definitely plays a part because it's hot outside, man. It is hot outside, and there's no way to walk around it. It is beaming, and you have pads on, and you have to practice in that on a daily. It's much different than if you have to practice or you get to practice at night So now there's the safety of the student body that we're talking about, the health, the health, the safety, and then also the well-being of the student athletes is about the ability to practice later. And I know we talk about adversity and at least football culture. Oh man, it makes you tough. And it does. I do. I do agree with that. I think it makes you tough. And I think the ability to play in heat is something that does not get enough recognition. We talk about the ability to play in cold, but the ability to play in Miami heat is different. I don't think that you can necessarily prepare for it all the time. And it does impact some people. It really does. Um, I know I said Miami because I just thought about the hottest place and one of the hotter places in the NFL and places that I've heard get that recognition. Like New Orleans plays in a dome, Atlanta plays in a dome, Houston plays in a dome, Dallas plays in a dome. Let me see. You know what? Miami and Jacksonville may be the only Southern teams to really play outside. That may be why I hear that discussed. But I'm thinking, yeah, I think Miami and Jacksonville are the only Tennessee, but I don't feel like Tennessee has that boom heat. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. The other thing is night games have a different environment. They have a different environment. You see people in the daytime, it look like they finna pass out in the stands. You see people concerned with staying cool. It's different. And then I just think playing at night gives you a different vibe, right? Like it's a different type of lock in as a fan when you're there at night. It's a different type of fun. Maybe it's because you're not worrying about the heat. I look at, like, we always hear about Death Valley. Like, we always hear about Death Valley, but it's a night game in Death Valley. I got to go one day. I got to go to a night game at LSU one day. Because they talk about that as one of the greatest environments ever. And it's not about playing at Death Valley at 11 o'clock a.m. It's about playing at 11 o'clock p.m., getting out of there at 11 o'clock p.m. That night game is the environment. Night games just are different. And I think it's because they're not as common. They feel special, especially if you're talking about Tuskegee, who's never done this before. That's going to be a special environment, the home opener, and it's at night. I wonder how many games they're going to try to position at nighttime. I really do. And then lastly, the thing that they're going to do for the student body is not just being able to go watch the games at nighttime in better weather, but they're going to have, like, I think movie nights is what they said. So they're going to have like a Jumbotron and you're going to be able to watch movies on the field. That's great. Now you're engaging. You're lighting up the field, not only for the players, not only for the fans, but just for the students. Maybe students who don't care about football, but they want to go watch something. Maybe they want to go watch Pulp Fiction, and that's playing on the Jumbotron. I don't know if you're playing Pulp Fiction at colleges, but it's a great movie. And if you haven't watched it, you should. Anyway, let's move forward because Willie Totten, he's been around since Pulp Fiction. The man's experience, and that's the biggest attribute that I believe he's going to bring to Fort Valley State as the new associate head coach and offensive coordinator. Let's talk about that as we continue with Locked On HBCU. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day, every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Thank you. Willie Totten joins Fort Valley State's coaching staff, and he adds experience more than anything else. He has a dual title. He'll be the associate head coach as well as being the offensive coordinator. I'm way more excited about him being the associate head coach, and I'm way more interested in him as a offensive coordinator. Let's break down the difference. So I'm interested as him being an offensive coordinator because he hasn't stepped into a role like this in a long time. This is the most responsibility that Totten has had on his plate since being a head coach at Mississippi Valley State a while back. Now, you probably know Totten from his time at Mississippi Valley State as a player, throwing to Jerry Rice, throwing to the GOAT, right? Breaking all of these records. That is what he is best known for. No matter what he's done in his coaching career, it will probably never outweigh what he did as a player, which is understandable. But Totten also was the head coach at Mississippi Valley State. He led them to a turnaround, gave them a winning season, and we know that don't happen. That does not happen at Mississippi Valley State. Winning seasons? Matter of fact, they haven't had a winning season since he left. They haven't had a winning season since he left. So it's rare. I think that was 06 the last time that they had a winning season. He ended up coaching there for a couple of years afterwards before leaving. But '06, '05, something around there, maybe both of those years, was the last winning season in Mississippi Valley State football history. So we're talking about 20 years since you had a winning record. Anyway, this is not about Valley. But he turned that team around. He had a quick turnaround, and he got a successful season out of Mississippi Valley State. And that is the last time that he's had this much responsibility on his plate. He's kind of gone through the gauntlet of positional ranks. So I'll be interested to see, now that he's an offensive coordinator and he's less specific. It's not just I'm working with the tight ends and I'll show some, maybe a little bit of love here to the quarterbacks. It's not I'm just working with the quarterbacks either, and maybe showing a little bit of love to these other positions. It's now a situation in which Willie Totten is over the entire offense. He has to be an orchestrator. He has to be a person who delegates a little bit more instead of just honing in on one position. I'm sure he'll still work heavily with the quarterbacks. That probably won't change. As the OC, as a former quarterback, to work closely with that position makes the most sense. But he's not going to be sitting here evaluating every single position with all of his strength. He's going to have to trust people. He's also going to have to call plays. It's a much different role to call plays versus to help people execute plays. I'm assuming he'll be the play caller. Some OCs end up don't calling plays, but that's rare. So I'm going to say that he's going to call plays. There's just way more on his plate. And the last time that he was a quarterback's coach on this level, if you want to use that, he ended up having a second-team All-SIAC quarterback in Frank Rivers. The passing offense was third in the conference. So I mentioned that just so you can get a slight understanding of, or maybe just not an understanding, but something to go based off of when you're talking about what he's done on this subdivision. But overall, like I say, he's just been doing the positional coach rotation. He's been tight end coach, quarterback coach. He's been at Valley, Alabama A&M, Southern, right? Like he's just been around the block as a coach. But I think in that experience of being a player, the experience of being a coach on different subdivisions at different positions, I think that's going to help him as a associate head coach, because you're looking at Marlon Watson, and they say in the intro for Totten, for Watson and his staff, Totten isn't just another assistant. And I'm sure he isn't, because Watson's not really experienced. To go get a guy with the experience of Willie Totten to pair with a coach who is relatively inexperienced in Marlon Watson, I think makes a lot of sense. We talk about this with guys who have no experience, like Deshaun Jackson and Michael Vick. Go get somebody who you can lean on, you can trust, who's been here. But I think when you have a low amount of experience, not just no experience, but a low amount of experience, getting people like that on your staff is just as valuable. It's not a booster. It's a foundation setter. And that allows you to have somebody who you may not know it all. Like Trey Oliver has been around long enough to where I feel like, all right, he's prepared for everything. He may get an elder statesman on his roster just to be a boost. But when you have a guy like Marlon Watson, who just has not been a head coach ever, and he hasn't been coaching for a super long time, I think having somebody with the experience of Willie Totten could go a long way. So that's my take on it. We'll be back on Monday to look at take a look at the fact that there will be no or less money games based off of how a lot of teams are reacting to the CFP crackdowns. So we'll talk about that on Monday. In the meantime, also remember, we're going to 3 days a week next week. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.